The Document Object Model, or DOM, is a structured representation of a web page that JavaScript can interact with. Think of it as a tree where each element on the page is a branch. When a web page loads, the browser creates an in-memory representation of the page. This is the DOM. JavaScript can then manipulate this structure dynamically, allowing us to change content, styles, and even add remove elements. The browser continuously renders the web page based on the in-memory DOM. Every change we make to the DOM with JavaScript is reflected visually, allowing for dynamic and interactive web experiences. With JavaScript, we can make web pages interactive by dynamically changing their content, styles, and structure using the DOM. The DOM is primarily used in web browsers, but similar concept can exist in other environments. Now let's go to Visual Studio Code and learn how to do this. So far, we have been using Node to run our JavaScript, but Node.js doesn't have a built-in DOM, so we can't select or manipulate HTML elements. To work with the DOM, we need to run our JavaScript inside a browser using an HTML file with a script tag. So to do that, I'm going to create a new file, call it dommanipulate.html, and in Visual Studio Code, we can simply type HTML, select HTML5, and it's going to create a boilerplate HTML for us, and we can write a script tag inside the head section and write our JavaScript in here. So first I'll show you how to select HTML elements using JavaScript, but first I need to modify the HTML a bit. So I'm going to pause the recording and do that. Okay, I am done. So let me show you what I did. Let me close this. So I have added two styles, two classes, button class and an item class. And inside the body, I have a heading with ID title, then a list with three items of class item and two buttons with class button, btn, right? And I have placed the script after the body because we haven't yet learned how to manipulate events, and this script needs to run, this selection needs to happen after the DOM has finished loading. So you could either use an event listener to listen to DOM loaded event or place the script after the body so that it executes after the browser is finished with the parsing the body element and creating the DOM. We have our script here. It's in the first line, we are using the document object, which is a global object available to JavaScript, which represents the in-memory DOM. And in here, we are using a function called getElementById and passing it title. So it's going to select all elements, which can only be one because ID is unique. So it's going to return exactly one element with the ID title. Then we have document.getElements by tag name, which allows us to select elements by type. So I'm passing in button here, and any elements of button type are going to be selected by this function. Thirdly, we have getElements by class name. So any element with a class btn applied on them would be selected. So we should be seeing two buttons each selected for this and this. And lastly, we have document.querySelector all, which selects all elements matching a CSS selector, right? And we are passing a dot item as the argument here, and it should select these three list items as a result. So we need to see the results in a browser. So let me bring it up. So here is our web page in the browser. Let me go right click inspect and open the console. And if I now reload it, we can see the results, our script executed, and we can see the heading for heading by ID, then buttons by type, two buttons, buttons by class, again two buttons, and items by query selector. These three items were selected because they had the item class applied on them. Next, let's see how to manipulate DOM, and I'm going to start off by manipulating or changing the heading up top. So to do that, let me go back to Visual Studio Code. We already have heading by ID selected up top over here, and we are going to leverage that. So I'm going to say heading by ID dot text content, and I'm going to say welcome to JavaScript. Right? Previously it says hello DOM manipulating word. So let's go back to browser and see what happens? All right, so once our script executes, it changes the heading to Welcome to JavaScript. We can also make other changes like change its color. So if I go here and say heading by ID dot style dot color equal to blue, let's do it in quotes and change it. See, we can also manipulate the style of the selected element. You can make such changes to any element in the DOM. And did you notice it's doing that without needing a full page reload, allowing for smooth content updates? This is the power of JavaScript that I talked to you about in the intro. Okay, we are back in the code and now let's talk about events. Event-driven programming is fundamental to making web pages interactive. Event listeners allow us to respond to user interactions like clicks and key presses. We also have events on document object itself like DOM loaded, but let's first handle a much more practical example of handling a button click event. So here I have added the code for that. Remember our buttons by type and buttons by class variables were each having two items. Here we are leveraging that and adding an event listener to the second button in the array. Notice the square bracket syntax. It is used to index into the array and select a specific item of choice from the array. Arrays in JavaScript are zero indexed, which means the first item in array is present at index 0, second item at index 1, and so on. DOM elements have a pre-built function called add-event-listener, which allows us to listen to specific event of choice and provide a callback function, which would be executed when the event occurs. In this case, the specific event of choice is click, which we are passing as the first argument. Remember, we could create a const variable for a function and pass it as argument, or we can even pass the function definition directly as an argument, which we are doing right here. My goal is to get you familiar with all available options as much as possible in little time that we have. So here when the button would be clicked, our callback function would be executed and alert is another pre-built function of JavaScript that would show a pop-up or message box with the string you pass as argument. In this case, button clicked. Let's try it out. So here we are back in the web page and since we did index 1, I'm going to press me and we see the button clicked event pop up, alert box showing up, right? But since we did not add an event listener to click me, pressing it would have no effect. But we can assign an event listener to this button and do an even more interesting stuff, which is adding some elements in the DOM. So as you can see, I have made certain changes here. I've created a new event listener on the first button and on the click event again, and I have added this content as the body of the callback function. So here what I am doing is I am creating a new element by using document.createElement and specifying the type of the element. So I would be creating a new div element in the in-memory DOM and would be assigning it to the new div variable. That new div.id would be runtime div, and I'm going to assign it text content. I was added at runtime by JavaScript. Wow. And since this is just a variable, it doesn't exist in the DOM yet. So we would be adding it to our runtime DOM by using document.body.appendChild and passing it as an argument, right? And it's going to append it to the body element of the in-memory DOM, and it should appear on the browser. I have changed the implementation of the second button event listener, and here I am finding the runtime div that we created in the first button click by using getElementById, assigning it to the runtime div variable, and then I am calling document.body.removeChild and passing it as the argument. So let's save it, go to the browser and give it a try. So I'm going to press the click me first, and we can see I was added at runtime by JavaScript. Wow. And if I press the second button, that should be removed. And here it goes. And did you see how smooth it was? No reload required. Nothing else changed. It was awesome. That's the power of JavaScript that we love. I am assuming you know that HTML documents and the corresponding in-memory DOM is hierarchical, with parent-child and sibling relationships. Using JavaScript, we can navigate between elements using properties like parent, first element, child, next element, sibling, etc. So let's go about doing that. First let me show you the HTML element we are going to be using. So this list element with the ID list was added to the HTML body, and it had three children with items 1, item 2, item 3 with class item. So I have added this code to traverse the DOM. First of all, I'm going to find the top level list element by using getElementById and passing it list as the argument. Once it's found, we are going to use first element child property of parent to find the first child, item 1. And then we are going to find sibling of first item using next element sibling on first item. And afterwards, just to make sure we are on the right track, I'm going to find next item dot parent, and we are going to check whether its ID is list. Let's see it in action in browser. So I'm going to reload. And here it is. Parent list element, untitled list, ID equal to list. First child is this, and if we expand, we can see it's item 1. Sibling of first child is item 2, of course, and parent of next child is the list item again with ID list. Understanding how to navigate the DOM allows us to interact with elements dynamically. Visualizing the DOM tree helps in grasping how elements relate to each other. And this completes our coverage of document object models using JavaScript. Next is a very exciting topic about async JavaScript. So let's go to it.